Hello, I'm Robert Lewis, and I'm a proud enlisted veteran that served active duty in the United States Marine Corps. Hoorah!
And I'm Shalom Klein, and I'm privileged to be an officer in the United States Army Reserve. Hooah! We both agree. We all serve. There we go. Robert, such a pleasure to be back on episode number 2.
Yes.
We all serve with you. How's your week been?
Oh, man, it's been great. Weather is phenomenal today. In our first episode, we've been getting such great feedback from Director Linda Chapalavia of the IDVA. She was just a wonderful first guest, and I'm excited about the gentleman we have today.
Indeed, Paul has been an amazing mentor to me. I think I shared this with you earlier in the week, but before I left, I commissioned as an officer through OCS, and that means I went through basic training, and I had a lot of questions. Paul was probably one of the last people that I saw before I left, and he was probably one of the first people that I reached out to when I returned. So great guy, shared a lot of great advice, and he actually, I don't know if you know this, he was enlisted before he became an officer.
I did not know that, and that was enlisted in the Army, correct?
Enlisted in the Army. We're ganging up on you, Robert.
Well, you know what? I got something to say about that. So you know what the true meaning of the Army is, right?
What's the true meaning of the Army?
It's aren't ready for Marines yet. All right. I had to put that out there, back up off me, and then you know what the true meaning of Marines is, right?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Marines are respected individuals needed everywhere serving. Hoorah!
Well, there's more of us than there are of you, so we're gonna have to get some of your Marine brothers and sisters on the show.
Quality over quantity, my man.
Yeah. Listen, no, you guys do great stuff, but ultimately, I mean, the theme of the podcast is really we all serve, and yes. I mean, you and I, we've been talking about this. We talk, almost every day, and I was in the Army. I am in the Army. You were in the Marines. You were enlisted. I'm an officer. I mean, the reality is that we all serve, and it's really not just about putting on the uniform. It is really it's a culture, and really anybody can serve, right?
Yeah.
Anybody
Absolutely.
can serve, and anybody
and
can
it just
volunteer.
Doesn't mean.
Go ahead.
Absolutely, and that goes to show with our colleagues. Although you and I have served, and many of our colleagues who have not served, but they serve in a different capacity. That they didn't serve in the military, but they serve in the community. One of the things I do want to say, a classmate of mine that I went to high school with, I believe, lost her son this weekend. So I just want to send my condolences and prayers to her and her family. I won't say names or anything, but it's a tragedy. It's as much good as there is in the world. There's a lot to be worked on, and I think some of the work you and I are doing, Shalom, with our current day jobs and with Illinois ESGR leads us to always understand service-minded individuals. So I just want to say this is perfect segue, I think, for our second guest.
Second of many, because it's been incredible watching the reaction, and we've already developed quite a lineup for the upcoming weeks. So Anybody that might be tuning in, make sure you subscribe on Facebook, on YouTube, on podcast. And we are, like I said last week with Director Chapalavia, we're like fine wine. We just get better with age. So this podcast is going to continue to get better and better.
Absolutely.
And we, kicking off with some fantastic guests. Of course, Linda last week, Paul this week, and to anybody that's tuning in, share this with somebody else that you know. It's not just about wearing the uniform, as you and I just said, Robert. I mean, it's a culture of service, and there's a lot of leadership lessons. So, yeah, thrilled to bring in our amazing second guest, Paul Knudtson, who is a technology consultant in the aerospace and defense practice at Accenture. And I was just telling you a little bit about Paul, and it's actually a funny story about how he and I met through a mutual friend, and I cannot be more grateful to our buddy Dan that introduced us. Great guy, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I think that the three of us all work in some similar spaces about continuing our service. I mean, Paul and I are both in the Army Reserve, and so we continue to put on the uniform. But it's when out of uniform, it's as much about who you are as when in uniform, and it's about paying it forward.
Yep.
And it's just fantastic. Paul Knudtson, who is one of many titles, and I had to pick one to put up here on the screen. The president of the SVA Illinois, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Welcome.
You bet. Hey, it's an honor to be here. Thanks, gentlemen, for inviting me. And I mean, if it wasn't for the Marines, what would we have to do to clean up messes all around the world? So Robert, I just want to I want to thank you and your brethren for all that you've done to ensure job security for the Army for years to come. So thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Cool.
I have one comment. Outnumbered, not outgunned.
That's right.
Oh, man.
No, I'll tell you.
Listen, Paul has been around in the Army for longer than I have, so he's able to be more brutal than me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, you know what? All joking aside, I've had the distinct, honor of serving in the Joint Forces as well, and two of my troop commanders, over the years, I've served directly for Marines as my troop commander, and I would tell you, I never worked with more professional intelligence officers who know how to take care of people, set the standard, and drive towards success. And some of the, best life lessons that I've learned came from, my brothers in the Marine Corps and everything, and having had the opportunity there. So, while, certainly we all love to joke and poke and all that good stuff and everything, there's no question that I've certainly benefited, from the great counsel and mentorship that I've gotten from some fine Marine officers and enlisted folks. So appreciate your service, Robert, and Shalom. You're starting your journey, so it's I'm excited for your future, and I'm truly excited to be here.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, man. And likewise, I've trained with the Army. I was on a MEU. I was on a Westpac for almost a year with the Navy. So I've done a lot of cross training, and a lot of those are my brothers as well. And I couldn't be more proud of anyone who decides to put on a uniform and serve their country. And so, man, you've done it in several capacities, man.
Yeah.
And you know what, for someone like you, so well accomplished, who served 25 plus years and still serving in the military, and you also serve as president and CEO of SVA. First of all, what kind of family do you have to come from and background to be of that kind of service mind, and then still have enough to have a family, man, at this point? So can you tell us a little bit about how you got here? Yeah,
sure. No, I appreciate that question. I actually do come from a very long line of service members. I think of my mom's dad. He served in the Navy in World War II. And when you think about service, and we all serve, even well beyond that, when I was a little kid, they were heavily engaged in the American Legion. And both my nanny and my poppy, my mom's parents, they served over at the VA there, over at Jesse Brown in their retirement. And they have, I actually have them in that garage back there, their awards for 15,000 hours of service.
Wow.
At the VA there, doing different things, whether it's checking on vets who are in, for procedures or whatnot, or doing odd things around the hospital there. My lineage and my experience growing up from a little kid, my dad was in the military, served in Vietnam. He was in the Army Security Agency, which is kind of one of the precursors to some of the, secret squirrel stuff that we see today and everything, which was kind of neat. And he never talked about that until the end of his days. And so I learned some pretty interesting things about his experience. But I grew up in that environment. blue collar, grew up here in the west side of Chicago, near
What?
northwest of
Are
Chicago.
you a west side or
Near
west
north,
suburbs?
so Belmont Cragen, right? So it's kind of in that mix, right? I'm at Cicero and Fullerton is where I grew up,
Now for all of my people that's from Chicago, they always listen, because even when I was in boot camp,
okay.
guys would say, I'm from Chicago, and then later on we'll be like, where about? They say, oh, well, Schaumburg. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I know it.
No.
Yeah, I'm from Joliet. No, you're not.
Yeah. So we'll accept you, but come on, be more specific.
No, buddy. I went to St. Patrick High School. I went to St. Genevieve, grew up in St. Genevieve Parish, and
right.
I bleed Chicago. So yeah, absolutely. And so shout out to your peeps here in the city as well, man.
I'm South Side, but thank you. You West Side, man. That's another whole rivalry. But anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, I wasn't. You talk about how my success, and humbly I appreciate that and everything, but it wasn't always like that, man. Let me tell you, everybody's journey into the military is unique, right?
Right.
Some people do it because they have, a lineage of parents and whatnot. Some people do it for the college money, right? Some people do it because they're at their end of their rope, and and in some regards, all three of those things fit my story back in 1994 when I was first coming to that conclusion. I was at a really weird spot. A lot of people know that I brag about I graduated from Northwestern, but I did that in 2013. Years and years, right? Like I was almost 40 when I finally graduated, and I'm really proud of that. But if you go back to the early 90s, I was a college dropout. I had left my first year. I didn't do very well. I went to community college. My girlfriend at the time, we were, struggling. Life was hard and all that stuff. And things, really came to a head at the end of 1993. And I'll never forget the decision I made to join the service. I was, my wife was actually in Florida with her family giving birth. We were young. We were teenagers, right? A lot of people know my story, man. And I'll share it with you guys. We were teenagers, we were young, and she was having, our first child down in Florida, and I was in Chicago, and it was 2 days after Christmas, and I'm like, I'm going to Florida, man, and I'm gonna go be there, and this is gonna happen. And I got on the wrong highway, and I headed south, going the wrong direction. I was like on 57. I should have been on 65, and I ended up, I don't know where I was, man. And and the car breaks down in the middle of winter, and I'm about 100 miles east of St. Louis, and two of my dad's younger brothers live out there. And so I didn't know what to do, and I called my grandma. I wasn't going to call my parents. I called my grandma. She's like, call your uncles. So they drove to pick me up in New Salem, Illinois, and then drove me back to St. Louis. And it was on that drive where they told me things about my dad that I didn't know, right? And his service and their experience being much younger brothers and how they looked up to him. And when you're kids, everybody looks at their dad in different ways and everything, you know what I'm saying? But I saw something there, and I realized, you know what, if I really want to be able to take care of a family, and if I really want to have, an opportunity at life, things are not going the way that they should right now. I'm going to take this path. And it was on that journey right then that my military and my service journey started, right? I knew it was the right decision because I had that family of service and I had all of those things. And I certainly needed the money for college, even though it took me another 15 years or so to get there. But it was really learning about what my dad's experience was like, and how that shaped him as a man and as a servant leader. And he certainly was a servant leader in this community, in a very quiet and humble way, that led me to the service. And, there finally January 1995, it took a year on the delayed entry program, but I joined the Army and became a medic. And my first half of my career, I was enlisted. But that's how I got there, right? Like that's really what my story was. And you know what? I'm certain that so many of us have that kind of, that personal story of why we're making that decision. And there's no wrong decision. And the good news is once we get in there, the good ones hopefully realize very quickly what an honor it is to be able to serve. It's truly an honor. People say, thank you for your service all the time. And my response to them, as one of my former bosses used to say, and now I say in remembrance, hey, it's an honor to serve.
Indeed.
Indeed, it is. And Paul, I know you and I have talked about this off air and off camera. We've talked about how your personal journey and your military journey are actually very, very much intertwined. You graduated from college, not at the typical sort of, as we would say, the op tempo. Not at the typical age of most college graduates. You graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern University, which is amazing. But at what?
Summa cum laude. But
Summa cum laude. There we go. Very impressive.
It doesn't matter.
Just a
very impressive. And but it was not it was not at the regular age. Tell us a little bit about when you went to college, your experience and going to college, and how that impacted your military career. Because I mean, I said this many times to anybody that's willing to listen regarding my reliance on the, as we say in the Army, the non-commissioned officers, and obviously, NCOs, as we say, run the Army. You were enlisted, and you finishing college was, I think, a major step, it sounds like, in becoming an officer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was all, you summed it up well. It was it's a journey of intertwined, pathways and everything. And my college experience actually continued early on when I was enlisted. My first duty station was in Korea. And when I came back from Korea, my girlfriend that I told you at the beginning of this story, now my wife, right? And Along, that's a whole nother story. We can talk about that one on over a couple of drinks or something. But we ended up reuniting again after my training in Korea and coming back. And then we were stationed in New Jersey. And I went back to school in 1997, 98 timeframe at Brookdale Community College. I did a couple of classes there, on active duty, and really have always persistently been trying to better myself. And, I had a lot of great mentors. And one of my mentors, senior enlisted Sergeant Gutierrez back out there in Fort Monmouth, would tell me, be a lifelong learner, right? Be a lifelong learner. It doesn't matter. Keep your journey going, keep staying focused. And so along the way, at each kind of, milestone in my military career, I continued to take another step forward in my educational career. And ultimately from Brookdale, then I did some online courses, and I wanted to become an officer, and that's a whole nother conversation. And part of that wanting to become an officer was really to have the ability to affect change at the unit level for the soldiers that I had been serving as a non-commissioned officer. I was non-commissioned officer from 1998 until 2008 when I was, or 2009 when I was actually commissioned. But yeah, it was in 2007 when I returned to Chicago after a stint on some active duty time, and I said, I'm going to go to Northwestern. I said, if I'm going to go back to school, I want to go to the best school that I can. I love Northwestern. It's here in my hometown, right? It's Chicago's Big Ten team, and so I made a commitment to do that. And along the way, I made the same commitment to based on some really great mentorship from some senior officers in the unit that I was with. That was the old 85th Division, Custer Division up there at Fort Sheridan, now that's part of the 75th Training Support Command, who coached me and said, you really have what it would take and to be a good officer. And so those two things were actually happening simultaneously. Interestingly enough, it was in 2009 that I was commissioned, and I had not yet finished my education yet. And I got a waiver. I was one of those last waivers, but it was 2009 was the surge, right? And they were looking for good warm bodies to throw at the fire and everything, And I raised my hand. I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I carved out a path that actually over those 3 years, from 2009 until 2011, I was commissioned as an officer, went to training, went to Benning, went out to Fort Huachuca, became an MI officer, went to Bragg, got classified as a civil affairs officer, and then went straight to Afghanistan. And so what happened was when I came back, I actually lost a year on my promotion to captain because I had not yet fulfilled my my educational requirement. but I was okay with that, right? Because I think at the time, you know, my strategy was always, how do I continue to serve, right? How do I continue to, that is way more important than meeting these milestones, because if I'm doing the right thing,
Yep.
right? If I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to be in the right place, and God's hand is always going to be on me, and I'm going to be doing what he wants me to do, right? And it just so happens that that was probably one of the best things that happened to me, because when I went back to Northwestern after all of that time in Afghanistan, I had such a tremendous experience. I was able to bring all of that real world experience into my political science degree, and had such a tremendous, tremendous experience learning from some great professors who were
Wow.
very kind to bring my experience into the classroom, and everybody rose, right? And I'm a firm believer that all ships rise with the tide, right? And so as I go up, so does everybody else with me. And if everybody else is going up, then I'm going up with them, right? Because we all rise together, you know, just as we all serve.
Amen, brother. You know, when you were talking, I was thinking about, I went into the military at 17. I was 18 after graduation from boot camp. And so I had a Staff Sergeant Henderson at the time. He retired as a gunny, but he was the inspiration for me. And although, like, I don't remember much of what he said to me, but how he made me feel, I'm reminded of that, you know, all the time. One of my favorite poets is Maya Angelou. And you know, it's a quote that she has, you know, whenever I make a decision with my heart, I usually make the right decision. Goes a little bit something like that. And it sounds like when you were in that car and it broke down, when you were going in the wrong direction and your people came and they got you, man, it was like fate, you know, like you said, God's hand was on your life. And
For sure.
Absolutely, man. And so for me, I think from your military service, it sounds like you're guided by the hand of God. You're guided by the universe as it pulls you in a direction. So maybe I'm assuming that that's kind of what led you eventually to SVA, possibly.
Yeah.
So
Well,
can you tell us a little bit about that?
yes, no, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, right? I mean, again, think about what was happening, right? It was 2000. I had these experiences in the school, and this is really what the story was. In 2007 and 8, when I was at Northwestern, I struggled at Northwestern. It was hard for me, and I had to work very, very hard. And then I went away to the Army, you know, went back on active duty, did 3 years, and came back again, and struggled through the experience at Northwestern.
Yeah.
And it was then that I learned about SVA as an organization. My good friend Rodrigo Garcia, somebody you guys got to get on this show, right? So Rodrigo, this is a shout out to you, buddy. You're up. You're on deck, right? I met Rodrigo Garcia, who's one of the founders of SVA, and he was a great coach, man, great mentor. And in that, you know, learning experience that I had there, I had the good fortune of being at Northwestern at a time when they didn't have a very good veterans program. Some might argue it still has some work to do, but you know, that's neither here nor there. At the time, I was able to, you know, establish the Northwestern University Veterans Association. And that began my student veteran journey, right? Not just being a student veteran, but being a leader among student veterans. And so we established a chapter there. We got involved. We ended up going to NatCon, to the national conference down in Orlando in 2000, and I think it was 8 or 9. It's right around that time frame. It had to have been 2008, because 2009 I was gone. But I met some tremendous people that are still friends of mine today, mentors, people that have pulled me up, and people that I've had the pleasure of picking up as well, right? And you know, that all ships rise with the tide. And so what happened was, over time, when I came back to Northwestern in 2000, after being in Afghanistan in 2010, I came back in 2011. Now I'm back at school 11 to 13, and I'm seeing the same problems, the same issues. And one of the challenges we saw was that while SVA National has done just a simply amazing job at being the advocate at the national level for student veterans across the country, really around the world, providing support and advocacy and resources for student veterans, there was a big gap between where they're at in DC and what's happening down in the college campuses. And so I got together with some other friends of mine that we built through that network, Now we're fast forwarding a little bit, 2013 timeframe, 12, 13. And we put together an event called the Student Veteran Empowerment Summit. And it was held out at DeVry University out in the west suburbs there. And some good friends, Ramon Ortega, Scott Stratton, the list goes on. James Flagg, right? Those are Justin. We're all there, right? Some of these names you may know, right? These are folks in the network that have been around for a while. And we all came together and we put on this event. And it was at that time that we said, you know what we should do? Let's create an organization that fills in the gap between national and the chapters, so that we can really have create the best opportunities for student veterans across the state of Illinois. And that was really the beginning of Student Veterans of America, Illinois. Again, having great friends like Rodrigo Garcia, who at the time was the chairman of the board at SVA, he supported our notion. Actually, Rodrigo gets full credit for our logo because he's the one who stuck that Illinois in there and he designed all that. So kudos to him. Can't take any credit for that. But we realized then, right, that and again, this is 2012-13 timeframe. Think about what was happening in the country, right? PTSD was on the rise. Organizations were running out to figure out how they can, lift up all of these soldiers who were struggling and all these problems and everything. And we looked at the situation and said, well, wait a minute, that's true, right? There definitely is an issue there. And don't take this the wrong way, right? I am not dismissing that. But at the same time, all the veterans that I know are movers and shakers. They're change agents. They are servants, and they're out there impacting their community. And what we really need to do is tell the story of how veterans are strategic assets. The experience that we have, the lessons that we've learned, when you take that and you put that into whether it's your business or your non-for-profit organization or your community organization or wherever it is you're at, we're going to come in and provide the lift that's needed in order to take that organization to new heights. And we push that notion out there, and we've lived by it for a very long time. And again, it's tied back to this whole notion of service as a strategy. What's our strategy for having a positive impact on our world and our community, in our churches, in our schools, in our businesses? The answer is being good servants. And we're better placed to learn how to be service-oriented, right? One of the core values in the Army is selfless service, right? And that's what truly it's all about. And so at SVA Illinois, we took those ideals, right, those core principles, and said, how do we help students get through academic advancement, through career progression, develop leadership development, and community engagement? How do we tie those four principles together, create programming, not super extensive, but really just enough in order to enable and equip, empower, rally? Really, our mission is to rally, equip, and empower the next generation of student veteran leaders, right? So that they can achieve their full potential, right, as strategic assets in the community. Paraphrasing our mission a little bit, but that's what it is. And now here we are, right, 2020, and we're still kicking in this virtual world. So a little bit about how I got to here.
It's That's incredible, great. Man. It's incredible, and I'm privileged to slowly be getting involved in following your lead in empowering student veterans. It's so important that to empower and equip, especially, bottom line, we're sharing this podcast in the midst of a COVID world. Yeah. And I think all three of us have had conversations at different points or another about how this is not a period that we should be scaling back. This is actually a period that we should be ramping up and trying to make even more of an impact. And Paul, I have to ask, right now you're at Accenture, and maybe we'll talk a minute or two about that. But sure. You were I believe your title was Director of Armed Services Relations at National Louis University, and in that role, I think, and I'm smiling at the two of my very good friends here on the screen. I think you have a mutual friend in common, which we'll talk about in a second. But in that role, you we're able to be really, really hands-on with this whole concept of student veterans. So I'm curious if there's stories you want to share. But before I go there, Robert, don't you guys have some friends in common?
We might, if you're talking or referring to IDVA, I think we might have a few in common. Well,
I'm sure General Steve Curta is a good pal of ours. I know you're doing some program directing over there, and so so Steve's great, and you know, I talk a little bit about how you know, I've been fortunate and blessed to have been surrounded by great mentors, and absolutely, you know, General Curta has been one of them. And it's funny, I did another stint back on active duty, right? So let's go back up a little bit. 2013 timeframe, 14 timeframe. 13. I go to Fort Bragg. I get on orders, and I do a 6-month bump down at Fort Bragg, and it was weird. That was during the time of sequestration, and so what I thought was going to happen actually got cut because of sequestration in 2013, and I was left on a lurch, and Dan Casey, who was a friend of mine in the network and everything, was the veteran program director, the director of student veteran services at National Louis University. And he had reached out to me incidentally and said, hey, I'm thinking about leaving because I've got this position with the city to do emergency management over there. Would you be interested in coming on to NLU? And I said, I don't know, man, I'm not sure. He goes, listen, let me set up a call with Steve Curta, have him talk to you about it, and you guys get together. And that was in like July of 2013, and by August of 2013, my orders ended. I flew back to Chicago, landed back here, and it started my 2-year journey at NLU under Steve's leadership and tutelage, where we really formed. And in fact, SVA Illinois doesn't exist without that moment, right? Doesn't exist without that, because it was in that environment at National Louis University on Michigan Avenue right there that we were able to cultivate the thought leadership that guided much of the ideas that we had thought about at that Student Veteran Empowerment Summit a year earlier. And that's where it all came together. And so, you know, that group of mentors and leaders, the original board from the Student Veteran Advisory Board at National Louis University, including folks like Steve Goodwin and Bob Bannis and Paul McConville, the current Chief Army, Chief of Staff of the Army's brother, was on our board, good friend of mine, Paul, and I'm too many to Jan Donatelli. I can go on. An amazing cast of characters, and so fortunate to have been mentored by them. But the real key takeaway that I want to leave everybody with here was the notion of wraparound services. And Robert, you're probably not unfamiliar with that term, because I'm sure General Curta is still talking about it today. But
absolutely,
you know, taking care of students on campus, right, and taking care of veterans in general requires that holistic approach. And what we built there was this notion of wraparound services that wasn't just good enough. It was not just good enough to make sure that they were being successful academically, but how are we going to be able to empower these students? So let me tell you about what that looks like, right? Yeah. I think about folks like, Maurice Coleman. I think about Pilar, and I think about, Riley Wright. And these are just a couple of student veterans that I was able to work with when they were students at National Louis. And I think about what they're doing right now, and how their careers have taken off. Look, National Louis is a great university, but these student veterans have their strategic assets, right? And when we empowered and equipped them to really achieve their full potential, these folks are achieving things that they will tell you, and I'll tell you the same thing. I never thought that I would be where I'm at, but I'm here because we all serve, right? Like you say, right? We're serving each other.
Good
We're
plug,
serving our country, my brother.
No, it's funny. Robert and I were talking about that literally yesterday. We were talking. I quoted you as an example of, I know all three of us. We don't count hours in terms of our volunteer activities, and in terms of service. It's part of our DNA. That's certainly it's a certain, like, it's in our genes, as regardless of what uniform you put on. it's very much a part of who we are, and givers gain. I mean, that's the reality. I can say that myself. I know, Paul, you
Yes.
exemplify that. I know a fraction of the things that you're involved in, and I'm in awe of it every single day. And I love that you just, dropped some names of some of these student veterans, because you have given it and given that bug to another cohort of student veterans to just make really, really good stuff happen.
Yeah, well, and we're fortunate even now at SVA Illinois to continue to bring on student veterans as part of our leadership development initiatives. One of those is to bring student veterans into our organization. We've got some great student veterans on our staff right now, like I think of Matt Sanchez and Matt Galloway. I think of other student veterans who have come through our organization over the years. Nick Conte comes to mind, right? Like, I mean, I could name them, I see them, right? And I think, how fortunate was I to have been surrounded by great mentors, and what a tragedy it would be if I wasn't able to pay it forward, if I wasn't able to impart, the knowledge and wisdom that has been shared with me. What a tragedy. That's the real tragedy. I think too often we forget. I'll share a story with you real quickly here, and I want to be conscious of the time. But when I was in Afghanistan, we all suffer. Everyone has their stories, right? And the short story is, there was an incident on the road one day with an IED, and it happened up in front of about 15 minutes up in front of me with a route clearance, and 4 troops in that MRAP lost their lives that day. 3 of them were in country for. They were doing a right seat, left seat ride. So there was 3 that had been in country for 2 weeks and 1 that had 4 days left. And sadly, they lost their lives that day, right? And when I came back from Afghanistan, this is late 2011, right? There was a lot of things happening in the world. I think that was around the same time as Trayvon Martin, right? And we're in that moment now, and I was putting all these things together. It's how sad is it that here we are in 2020, dealing with the same problems we were dealing with in back then. And but I thought, tragedy. I thought about the concept of tragedy, and I wrote a piece on it, and it's out there in the web somewhere. And what I really learned in that moment was that tragedy would be those of us who lived, right? Those of us who didn't perish, who were actually saved because of that vehicle that was in front of us down the road 15 minutes ahead, right? I was recently reminiscing about this, and what a tragedy it would be if we didn't do everything that we could possibly do to make this world a better place and live out our full potential, right? Because of their sacrifice. That, my friends, would be the real tragedy. And so I live my life every day very, very much aware of the blessing that I have because of their sacrifice, and committed to not leading a tragic life. And the way that I do that is by continuing to serve, man, and trying to, help one person at a time, one day at a time. Maybe this will help. We'll see.
Wow, man, so inspirational. And Paul, you keep evoking one of my favorite authors, Maya Angelou. It's you seek patience and passion, because patience alone cannot build the temple, but passion alone will destroy the walls. You have to have a balance, right? And just speaking to what you've been able to do with not only your professional life, your service in the military, your professional life outside the military, but still serving nonetheless. That is so impressive, man. And really, just you're a leader in many ways, I believe, than what you even know. But I'm gonna move on a little bit, and I wanted something that was interesting to me about your background that I personally kind of geek out about. I like politics, man, a little bit. Yeah. So I know, man. I read a study, 2018.
He pulls the beer out.
Harvard.
I'm gonna keep this loose. All right, let's go.
Yeah, keep it loose. All right. Don't get another one yet, though. Wait a second.
No.
So the Harvard Kennedy School, man, did a study, and they said that history a lot of times shapes one's politics. So when I saw that you had involvement with the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, I'm like, I wanted to know, how did all of your service, how did your upbringing, your experiences with spiritually, physically, what you've experienced, and then just holistically, family-wise, what shaped your choice to get involved with the DNC, and how did your involvement with the DNC shape the rest of your path?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, man. It's funny, right? Because politics there's a saying that comes from our neck of the woods, right? All politics is local. Yep. And when I was a political science student at Northwestern, so I've got all those great 101 classes where you learn all the buzzwords and all that stuff. And one of the things that I really have carried with me for many, many years, even before my education and whatnot, is that politics is really about the pursuit of power. And the question that we then have to ask ourselves is, what do we want that power for? What is the purpose of that power that we're seeking to achieve, right? And my experience in the military has taught me that people with power have a great deal of influence on the lives of others, right? Whether that's like force of power, or the power of influence, or the power of persuasion, or the power of the purse, or all of these different power principles, right? Mm-hmm. As citizens, it's our responsibility to ensure that the people that we entrust with that power are carved from the same cloth that we are. Mm. And so my whole idea of getting involved with politics, and frankly speaking, right, it's not about the DNC, right? It's not about the RNC. It's not about party politics or whatnot. I've got lots of friends. In fact, half of the people that I mentioned in this conversation are on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, right? Yep. Air quotes for those of you who are listening. But it has nothing to do with that, right? What it really matters is, as Martin Luther King has said, it's about the content of our character, right? We don't judge people by the color of their skin. We judge them by the content of their character.
I love it.
And so why would I get involved in politics? Because I'll tell you what, man, I'm so sick and tired of listening to people piss and moan about what's going on in the world, but they don't do a damn thing about it, right?
Amen.
So what can I do? Well, what I can do is I can help look for, folks that are out there that I believe have, the character that we need to represent us and wield that power that we entrust, right? Because it's power of the people. This is right, by, with, and for, man. This is America. People talk about, it's funny, I'm going to digress a little bit, right? But we talk about how, this COVID moment, right? We now know that the country, our government, knows how to take our power away. No, they don't. The government is us. We put them there, man.
That's right.
We're the ones who make all these decisions. Don't fool yourself, man, into believing the echo chamber that you put yourself into. Right? Yep. Don't fool yourself there. Realize that activism doesn't have to necessarily be protesting in the streets, although that is, God bless them, right? They're doing the right thing, and speaking their minds and speaking truth to power.
Yes.
The same power that they put there, right? Speaking truth to power. And so my involvement, within the Veterans Military Family Council, I'm the Midwest regional leader here. I'm fortunate. I served Illinois. Now I'm serving the Midwest, and we're bringing people together. And really what we're focused on is ensuring that the values and the character that we have all instilled, whether you're in the Army, the Marines, whatever, the Navy, Coast Guard, Merchant Marines, the Air Force, Space Force, it doesn't matter, right? We have content and character. And that's what we should be looking for in our leaders. And that's what I'm trying to do on a daily basis, with my political involvement.
And, as they say in the Baptist church, the doors of the church are open. We have a plate for offering for you, Paul. You just gave a sermon. everything you spoke, man, was truth and transparent, and we appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
Amen.
thanks.
Amen.
Thanks,
and Paul, I have to ask you one more question, and we're going to start to wrap this up because oh my God, I know we could go on for hours. You've got an incredible story,
Yes.
and the story's still continuing to be written because you are we are citizen soldiers, and that means that right now we're in our comfortable civilian clothes. You're enjoying
bearded up.
You are bearded up, enjoying this whole virtual battle assembly thing that we've been doing a lot of these days. That will end. So I'm curious.
Sooner than later. Mine actually ends in a couple of weeks. I'm going to our summer AT is on in person, so we'll see how that goes. But
same
go ahead.
here. We're up. We're up in mid-July. So Paul, I'm curious. Through your time, and I know you've done a lot of active duty stints, how your civilian life has contributed to your military service, and very importantly, vice versa, how your military service, those that have led you and those that you have been privileged to lead, how it influences your civilian life. And I have to give a shout out to your wife, Nicole, that's allowing you to do this today and has allowed you to do all of the crazy things in your life. And I believe 5 wonderful children.
And thanks, man. And even though you teed that up, literally that is where I was going, because the answer is, I don't do any of this without having, just an incredible family. And truthfully, the veterans and military families idea, right, is crucial, because I don't think anybody's paid more for my service than my family has. And that is for sure, right? And so you ask, like, how has one influenced the other and the other influenced, I will tell you, type A's, right? Folks that are out there that are running and gunning all day long and everything. Sometimes we take on too many priorities, right? And if you take on too many priorities, then you start to lose sight of what's important, because you have too much, right? And one thing that the military, in terms of like influencing my civilian life and really my family life, I've been fortunate to be surrounded by some great field grade officers, right? Majors, lieutenant colonels, and tremendous non-commissioned officers, senior leaders, command sergeants, majors, who they know when they've got somebody with talent, and they know when that person with talent is getting burnt out. And if they're good leaders, the first words out of their mouth is always going to be family first. It's time to take a knee. That actually happened when I was at Fort Bragg. My last active duty stint ended in 2018. I did 3 years down at Bragg. I served with with JSOC and the Joint Special Operations there in the Special Mission Unit, and tremendous honor, tremendous privilege, and while this is a moment of vulnerability, right? I wanted to keep going. I wanted to keep going deeper and keep running and keep sprinting and keep serving and keep protecting and keep doing all that stuff. And I had a group of leaders who looked at me and they didn't say this exactly, but what they said was, Paul, it's time to go home. It's time to take care of your family again and put your family first. And so in March timeframe, when that decision was being made of 2018, it was my experience in the military that landed me at Accenture. And now I have all of this great, set of experiences and knowledge and hopefully a little bit of wisdom and everything that's been imparted to me through all of this, that I get to bring that into this now corporate environment, working, as you noted at the beginning of this call, in the aerospace and defense practice, to help work in that same, and I'm still serving because I'm looking for opportunities to engage in a way where my company and what we bring to bear can have a positive influence on the defense industry so that the warfighter can go out and continue to serve. And while I may not be at the tip of the spear anymore, and by the way, it's not sexy. It's mostly sitting in front of a computer just like this most of the time. But anyway, the truth is now I'm fortunate enough to have been given another opportunity, lifted up once again, to work and really spend. I'll tell you, the last 2 years with my family have been incredible. Vacations, working on the house. We're out here in the garden working together. My kids are doing just amazing things. I wish I could talk to you about them all day. And in fact, we should probably do that. But I've got, one who is following in my academic footsteps with a 3.8 something and chasing the State Department. I got another one that's coding. I've got another one who's an artist who's one day is going to, just be able to portray what's in her heart onto canvas and hopefully inspire people and everything. And that's just 3 out of 5. Everybody's doing wonderful, working hard and just enjoying life, man. And what a blessing, man. What a blessing. So blessed.
Agreed. Now you have a phenomenal family, and I can tell that even before you described them, just because of who you are. And I'm sure if you're pouring into them the same way you serve all others, they're going to be just as strong in service and leadership as you
they
are.
are kids, man. So let's not forget that they ain't hearing much of anything these days. But hopefully,
but they do. You're right. I got 4. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know
what?
Just plant that seed and hopefully it'll grow, man. Hopefully
what, Paul? It's the foundation that you put there, because you can leave base. It's just like baseball. You got to come back home at some point. When life hits you, you might go to first, second, third. You might be in the outfield, but the goal is to get home. Amen. And so you've given them home in a significant way, man. And hey, man, that's why you're on here, man, because you are a success in many ways. And I salute you, my friend.
Thanks, man. Same to you guys.
Well, wow. What a conversation, Robert. What a conversation.
Yes, Shalom.
And Paul, I was taking notes. I got Rodrigo over here. I've got Pete Kalenic. I know we talked about the two of them.
Yeah.
We talked about General Curtis. So, I mean, hey, we've got a fantastic.
Yeah, you got to line. That's the lineup for this conversation, my brothers. You guys are going to be having. You can write a book, man. You can write a book with whatever you're going to get when you listen to those. You think my stories are good? Listen to their stories, man, because they're the ones who've inspired me, right? Those are the ones who've motivated me. And so, if I'm anything, I am nothing but standing on the shoulders of those who come before me.
Appreciate you coming on, and can't wait for our next conversation, Robert.
Yes.
And we're going to be doing it same time, same place, same bad channel, right here.
Paul, we got to have you back on as well.
Oh yeah.
Hey, man.
Oh yeah. Well,
whatever you guys need, you guys are doing phenomenal work, and your hearts are in the right place. And I appreciate what you guys are doing there over at IDVA. Shalom, what you're doing now, working, with us and coming on board at SVA Illinois, and really your journey in the military. And I know you've got a deployment coming up soon, and we won't go into details, but Godspeed to you and your men and your women that you're leading and serving and everything. And I know your hearts are in the right place. So it's been a privilege to be here with you today.
Absolutely. And Paul, last thing, do you want to share the SVA website and all that good stuff?
Yeah, SVAIllinois.org, SVAILLINOIS.org. Come check it out. If you're interested, if this inspired you to figure out how you might be able to, lift up a student veteran and get involved and get engaged, you can reach out to any one of us. I mean, there's so many opportunities to serve out there. What a blessing it would be for this medium to be able to grow that effort, huh?
Absolutely. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
And Robert, any closing thoughts?
No, it is a blessing to have you as a guest, Paul. I just want to reiterate that. And it's been an absolute pleasure, man, to have this conversation with you. Looking forward to it. Yeah, we're going to have to get offline and talk.
If you like what you heard on this conversation, like and share. Like and share. We got to say that from the beginning.
Yeah,
right?
like and share. And can you hit them with the hashtag We All Serve, Paul?
Hashtag We All Serve. It goes like this, man.
There we go. Like I said, this is going to get better, like fine wine. It's going to get better with age. So we'll figure out that whole like and share thing and all that good stuff.
We're going to bar low enough for people to aspire to leap over it.
Oh yeah.
Amen.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you both. Great conversation. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. And you can find our last conversation with Linda Chapalavia on it's actually on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, wherever your favorite podcast platform is found. You can find it right over there. And stay tuned again, this same bad channel next week, same time. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We all serve.
We all serve.
We all serve.